presentation of the.
Hello.
And then Lisa, will you let people in who, come into the waiting room? All right, thank you. So this is for a presentation by one of the finalists for the position of campus director here at the Kuskokwim campus. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm Diane McGackran. I'm chair of the search committee, and on behalf of the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, Kuskokwim campus, I welcome you to this online event. It's great if you would keep your connection on mute, and this presentation is also being recorded. So if there's something you missed or you want to view it again, you'll get a link for that. Finalists for the, and also we're not going to respond to questions during Ms. Goolsby's presentation, but we will have Q&A after the presentation. And you'll be able to put those into the chat, or you can raise your hand with the icon, the emoji for that, and I'll call on you to ask your question directly. Finalists for the Kuskokwim Campus Director position will have a 30-minute public presentation, and this will be focused on the candidate's vision for the campus and what experiences and abilities they bring to lead the campus in those directions. Also, it'll demonstrate the candidate's ability to organize their time, present material clearly, and engage effectively with an audience. And then we'll have, like I said, we'll have a 15-minute question and answer after the presentation. Audience members will also be asked to complete an online feedback form for each candidate. Now you can find that in the link that Lisa Yancey would have sent you for today's event. And you can also go to uaf.edu/rural, and you can click on the Kuskokwim campus, and there's a link there. This event is part of the process that the College of Rural and Community Development uses to gather broad public feedback on candidates that are applying. Before getting to this stage of the process, candidates had to successfully navigate 2 interviews. The screening committee was made up of university employees and community members, and we'd like to acknowledge the many hours of time and energy the following committee members gave to facilitate this process. Sheena Turner, fiscal manager for the College of Rural and Community Development. She's on the second page there. Byron Bluehorse, who's the interim director of the Interior Alaska campus. Diane McGackran, myself, professor of Rural Human Services, Kuskokwim campus. Katie Reardon, the assistant director at the Kuskokwim campus, and Kathy Neneman, head of social services at the Association of Village Council Presidents, or AVCP. The hiring authority for this position, the final decision will be with the Vice Chancellor, Charlene Stern, and she will take into consideration the recommendations of both the committee and your feedback that will be sent to her anonymously. So at this time, I'm pleased to introduce the first of 2 candidates to make a presentation, Ms. Carolyn Goolsby. I will let you know in the chat when you have about 10 minutes left, Carolyn, if that's helpful to you. And let's now do the magic. Let's see what happens when you go to screen share for your PowerPoint. Scott is there, ready, willing, and able to help you.
Okay, are you seeing my slide?
Yes.
Are you seeing anything but my slide?
Just your slide.
Just the slide. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Carolyn Goolsby. As you heard, I am your candidate for campus director here at the Kuskokwim campus. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement. I recognize and honor the unique and enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and their territories. I was born and raised on the ancestral lands of the Yamasee and am grateful to live and work in Linkitani. I present today from the homeland of the Yupik people. I make this acknowledgement as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Native peoples whose lands and waters we benefit from today. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, And just to let you know a little bit about me, I was brought up by my grandmother. She was a strong, resilient, brilliant woman. She was a computer programmer, one of the first there ever was in World War II, and therefore also a code breaker. She brought me up to be self-reliant and independent and resilient like her. I was always involved in creative pursuits. I was a musician, I was an actor, and I was always a very, shall we say, intellectually active child. I took my undergrad degree at what was Armstrong State University, which was a remote campus of the University of Georgia, and now it is Georgia Southern University. I did it in a voice performance as an opera singer. And then about the time I was ready to graduate, I learned that I needed to start caring for my grandmother. Her health began to fail, and so I needed a steady job, and I needed good work, and I needed a job where I was not on the road all the time. And so I took a degree in library science. I got my master's in library science from the University of Maryland in 1993. That is in suburban DC. And so right after that, I joined up with one of the 7 or 8 firms that did nothing but contract out master's degree librarians to the federal government. I had done an assistantship at the National Agricultural Library at the USDA, but I started out contracting with the National Library of Medicine, with the Smithsonian, and with Library of Congress. And a professor of mine said, the smartest thing you could do is be a contractor at first, because they won't pay you and they'll work you to death, but you'll learn everything. And she was right. And so after about 7 years, which was my plan, I decided to go into university libraries. I liked the work. I worked at Clemson University first as a division head in the library, and then I got promoted within the state of South Carolina. It's all one system in South Carolina. It doesn't matter which school you're at or what type it is. I got promoted into a department head position at Greenville Technical College. And it was about at this time too, by the way, that I was on the Jeopardy television program, and also fulfilled a lifelong dream, a 21-year dream of winning a world weightlifting championship. I'd been lifting since I was 15 at the time. And so after I went to Greenville Tech for a while, I was recruited to Florida State University. They saw me make a presentation at a conference and wanted me to come work for them. And I did. And I also, in addition to being a department head there in the library, which was treated as a college, I also was an instructor, visiting instructor in the College of Information at the graduate level. I was on the graduate faculty there. When my grandmother was no longer with me, I became a monastic observer. And what this means is you live in the monastery and you're just observing the way they live, and you're on a very, very long retreat. And so it was exactly where I needed to be. It wasn't my calling to become a religious a nun, but it was a great experience, and it was 10 months of introspection and hard work. After I left the monastery, I went to work for Tacoma Public Library. It was kind of the first job I found, and then I was promoted to a director job in Canada. And so I've worked in Canada, Indiana, and now I work as the library director in Haines. I want to talk a little bit about this path for me and what that brings to my experience for this position. So for DC contracting, I kind of cut my political teeth in DC. And so I understand how the political world works, why politicians sometimes make the decisions that they do. Dealing with a federal bureaucracy or a state bureaucracy is not unfamiliar to me. I also learned how to bridge my company and my contracting officer and the agency for which I was working, and the people who worked alongside me in federal jobs doing almost the same thing, and learning to communicate with those varying constituencies. Some people need a different form of communication. Some people see you differently, and you have to adapt and meet people where they are. Each client has a different way of doing things. So you learn to adapt and learn to understand that a different way of doing things is not better or worse, that it's just different. And finally, operating with less leverage. So a contractor does not have the most political power in that relationship. You can be effective by knowing how to communicate.
Just hang on a second, Carolyn. I think I muted the person who had the audio problem. Go ahead.
Thank you. And then corporate management. Corporate management, I worked for Ingram Book, which was the largest distributor in the world at the time. They were Amazon's supplier before Amazon had their own warehouses. I had several clients. Sometimes when people ask for something, I learned, they're unaware that there's a different solution. They're unaware that there's something that could be better for them. One of my favorite quotes about business is Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they'd have told me they wanted a faster horse. So I learned to hear what people needed and what they were asking for on the larger scale rather than the actual thing that they thought was the best idea, and be able to present an idea to say, you know, we can do that and that's fine, but here's something that might work better. Assessing service options and finding creative solutions was a big part of that job. Navigating the business world, business has a different set of priorities, and if you can identify someone's priority, then you can negotiate and collaborate with them much more easily because you can come to a better consensus on things. And different structures meant I had to manage differently based on individual communication styles and needs and results and goals. And so I learned to apply different management styles, again, to reach people where they are who worked for me, and get to know what they needed and what was happening with them. Academic libraries, I have two sets of experience there. My faculty experience, you know, just how things work in the academic world. And I was a tenure track faculty member at Clemson University. I understand that part, although I think your tenure process is slightly different. The logic is pretty much the same. And academic culture is different. It's not just layers, it's relationships. And you need to get into those relationships of trust with people, mostly by being trustworthy and showing that you are a person they can work with. In our system, committee work was part of the process, part of our tripartite process. The other three were publishing, service to the profession, and research. And so I have worked on many academic committees, and I understand the processes involved in those. When I went to Greenville Tech, I became a department head and learned a whole new culture around community colleges. Community colleges are often thought of, and I think community campuses too, as advanced high school or junior university. And they're not. They are their own thing with their own culture and their own missions and goals. And I learned a great deal. You know, it's its own flavor and its own rhythm. And then at FSU, I learned course development when I became a teaching faculty member. I worked with a woman named Arlene Taylor, who has multiple Fulbrights in the field and literally wrote the book on the subject of information organization and cataloging. And she and I developed a two-part course advancement from information organization through a professional cataloging course. And that was an education in and of itself. And it was kind of a baptism by fire, actually. I had to develop that course and immediately start teaching it. But then I became, you know, department head experience puts you in a different set of skills. I learned a whole new way of working, of navigating university politics as a whole, of balancing needs. You know, university politics are a thing. And whether that's budget or other resources or just advocating for your department, you have to form the relationships that get you into a position of trust and become that person that people will listen to. I had to learn to balance the needs of my students and the faculty and division heads and the university as a whole. I was a liaison to several departments and had to learn to work with different departmental cultures and across disciplines. The dance department is not the Latin American history department, and I was liaison to both from the library. And I was also liaison to a remote campus in Panama City, Panama. I helped them communicate back to the university libraries and to the university as a whole without the benefit of Zoom, which was a real challenge in those days. Being a department head meant I had to learn how to do the planning and the preparation to make sure that we were in a position to get what we needed from both the department and the university. Things like making sure everyone knew how much money we spend on their departmental resources, you know, in Latin American history or dance or whatever, how we support their work, what our mission is. They get to know us. And instead of letting the library become this other thing that nobody really knew what they did, but they knew they had to have one, it became an integral part. And that was a library-wide initiative, and I was proud to be a part of that. And then there's the documentation and the communication and the patience that we don't always get what we want when we want it, but we can eventually get it. These things often take time, especially when you're trying to do something new. In universities, very, very few things move very quickly, except for perhaps basketball games. And even then, you never know. Monastic observation, it was an important part of my life and a defining part. When my grandmother was no longer with me, I decided to look into that religious life, and it's a whole new set of social rules. We were cloistered, which means we didn't leave the property. We were silent, which is not a vow, it's a rule, but you don't speak in matters outside of work. And I have up here the saying, ora et labora, prayer and work. That was the basis of our life. Everyone has meaningful work. Work is prayer, prayer is work. We had another part that isn't usually mentioned, which is reading. So we gather for prayers 8 times a day. We set aside 2 hours a day to study, and we worked in manual labor. And that new way of knowing that includes mind, body, and spirit all at once is a very powerful thing. I tend to be up in the head sometimes, and I learned how not to do that. I've always had an active mind, but how to slow down and listen and not fill in the silences was a very important skill that I learned there. Knowing when to be direct and when to be indirect when talking to someone. Monastic life has a very interesting culture of nothing is particularly direct. And if you want to know something, you have to approach it kind of in an oblique angle. You learn patience when you live with the same group of people and you can't get away from them. You learn to meet people where they are and to accommodate people who perhaps think differently or who might be struggling that day. You learn to be accommodating. You learn to be a good friend and a good partner through life with people. And that was the most interesting thing and the most important thing I think I learned in a monastery. When I came out of the monastery, as I said, I went to American Library Association conference and I got a job, and I didn't much care which one at that point. I needed a job, and I ended up in a public library in Tacoma. And I learned about finding money and dealing with budget cuts, and we were dealing with some heavy cuts at the time. It's out there. People want to help you. It's finding them and communicating with them in a way that demonstrates to them that you're doing the things that they want done. I worked, for example, in Canada into a 79.6% increase in our budget for the library, from 3.2 million to almost 5.9 mil. Government support from communicating our mission, our vision, the need for us that they had, and that we were doing work that they wanted done in the community. And also corporate grants through community relations departments. It helps if they really want to polish their image, but you have to be careful with corporate grants, because if a corporation has done damage in a community and you tie yourselves to them and their money, that can be devastating for an organization. I learned how to play the long game. And what I mean by that is in good times, you set a floor, you get more money because there's money to be had, but you also do the psychological and political work of setting that floor so that people can't imagine going below that. This is what the minimum that we need, so that times aren't as bad when bad times come again, and they do. You've set a floor, and that's an important thing to do, but it takes, it's a commitment. Also, making the organization visible. When I got to Canada, Fort McMurray, a lot of people didn't know we had a library. In town did, but nobody in the country really knew we had a library. And by the time I left 3.5 years later, we were one of the top 25 libraries in Canada. We were recognized as one of the major urban libraries of Canada. And that's about making the organization visible, sharing what you're doing, putting myself as the director out there, becoming members of communities, forming and communicating a vision. And it doesn't have to be a great pie in the sky thing. It can be just, here's who we are, and here's what we want to be, and here's how we want to do that. Come join us, come share that vision with us, and then communicate. That is the most important thing I think I do. Haynes, I'm the director there now, part of community, because the library is visible and engaged, and there's more support than ever because I put myself out there. I'm on the radio, and in the community generally, everybody knows where I work. In Haynes, as with here, if you see somebody, you pass a car, you wave. I had a friend visiting, and she said, "Do you know all these people?" And I said, "Not all of them, but they all know me." And if you are out there in the community, you have to accept that this is something that you do. It's part of your job. We represent our organization. I have to be comfortable being the face of the organization when I leave my house. And I am, because I believe in the organization. I believe in what we do. So I'd like to talk about 3 things that I think are the most important of all the pieces in this position. To me, they kind of fall into 3 big categories of administration, leadership, and community engagement. Administration, to my mind, is about people and money and vision, but mostly people, because the people are why we need the money and the vision. A campus director serves multiple constituents, right? You serve the faculty, you serve the students, you serve the community, and you serve the university. I didn't put that on there, but that's true. It's about making an optimistic and realistic plan. It's fine to be optimistic, but if you can't realize it, nobody takes it seriously. And it's about setting priorities and sticking to them. Even when things change, there should be some things that do not change. We may change the way we go about them, but the priority itself doesn't change. It's about the flexibility then to course correct without abandoning our plan. It's about aligning our budget planning and practices with the plan. It's about managing the details, but you also need to be able to see the big picture with equal acuity. It's about the drive to work for the good of others. I tell people, if you want glory and you want recognition, don't go into administration. That is not what you're going to get. And right now, administration is about almost moving from life in the fast lane to life in oncoming traffic. You know, it's as you become more connected to others, there's more and more to take in and more to organize in your head. And as we learn new possibilities and other ways of doing things, we can implement them, but be flexible, but always be true to the vision, because the vision is why we do what we do for our students, for our campus. Sorry, I'm looking at the slide again. Administration, it's about listening, empathizing, and responding to others' concerns. Hearing is ineffective if you don't listen. Listening is ineffective if you don't empathize, and empathy is ineffective if you don't respond. The most important thing I do as an administrator is communication. And there are all kinds of ways to communicate. You know, you have to communicate about decisions which need to happen in a timely manner. You have to have collaborative problem solving and solicit information that you can use to process. You have to make a decision. Sometimes somebody has to make the call, and you make it, you own it, and you communicate it, including how you came to the decision. You need to be transparent about these things. And finally, communicating from the university. Sometimes it's bad news and sometimes it's hard to deliver, but it's there and that's part of your job. Leadership, as opposed to administration. Leadership is about leading this faculty and staff and students, recruiting the highest quality people we can get. A campus director has to be a leader to everybody, and we set high expectations, but not unreasonable ones. Leaders collaborate and encourage collaboration so that we put out our best work together. And as a leader, it's my job to support faculty and staff for their success, for advocacy for them, for mentoring if they need it, seeking funding, providing for professional development opportunities. All of these things are leadership as well as administration. You facilitate relationships. I think this is one of the most important things. If you want a good team, you have to facilitate relationships among individuals and among departments and units. That doesn't mean endless meetings where nothing gets done, but I tend to have a collegial style, and I would foster those kinds of relationships too. As a leader, I have to think of the whole organization. Everybody contributes to it all. And also as a leader, I balance the best interests of our individuals against the interests of the university and the administration. Apply standards, rules, and rewards fairly. You know, I have to be clear about the rules, about acceptable risk, what gets rewards, what gets trouble. The university has rules, and it's important to make sure no one gets ahead or behind for any reason other than their work, which includes the idea of good relations among all of us and all pulling on the same rope. Leadership to students, I think this is something we all have to participate in. Make college more attractive than their alternatives. Help them adapt to Western style scholarship while remaining grounded in their culture. And we all need to show leadership. We all apply empathy to those who are away from home and learning this new way of knowing and thinking. We lead by instilling the confidence in them that they can do this and they can do it without losing who they are. We can think about the programs that they want, programs that have benefits to them in their communities. And we have to inspire to reach beyond perceived probability. So many times people don't go and do things because they say, I'd never be able to do that. I've never had any experience with that. I'm not qualified, I'll fail. And we want to teach our students to reach beyond the probability and into possibility. We also make our campus experience as attractive as possible, which, you know, food and living quarters and so on go a long way toward that, but we have to be mindful of the deeper things. So we can remain grounded in the culture while instilling the confidence to interact with a different way with Western style scholarship. Personal and academic support is so important for people to know that they're not alone and just floundering here, and genuine care for their success. Again, no, we don't want to seek glory, right? We take pleasure in the achievements of others and demonstrating an investment in their well-being. Their well-being is our well-being, and we should make that very obvious to our students. With our community, we have to be a part of a community. We live here. Respect and genuine care for this community. We are caring for this community's most important and most precious resource. They're young people, and we're asking them to trust us and to help shape those young minds. That is huge. Money is a need too, not our only need. Meeting other goals is important, like forming partnerships and engaging the community and earning that trust. And if we get a benefit from it, that's a good partnership. The best partnerships fill a priority need for both. I partner now in the library with many organizations, the Watershed Council and the Chilkoot Indian Association and so on. And those are absolutely necessary. They're not necessarily monetary partnerships, but they are beneficial ones. And finally, interaction. We communicate and we participate in the community. We go out and meet people when we're not trying to recruit them, or I tend to get involved in things. You meet people away from work and they get to know you, and you come into a position of trust. As the campus director, what I bring, we've all seen, I'm sure, the university mission and vision. I won't read it out, but I have read it and agree with it. I'm far more interested actually in the campus mission and vision, especially the vision that our students are given wisdom to learn and we learn through them. And that is wholeheartedly what I believe in a learning environment. I think that it's relevant to our students, takes into account their needs and their cultural ways of knowing, and shares in that. And it's a two-way street. But we learn new ways of knowing as well, those of us who came up through Western scholarship. My general philosophy of education, it comes down to 3 quotes. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. That's Aristotle. Most learning is not the result of instruction. It is the result of unhampered participation in a meaningful setting. If it means nothing to the student, they're not going to learn much. And then one of the best philosophers I've ever met, you grow more in a crooked row. There's a man named Tillman Cross. He was my grandfather. And you grow more corn in a crooked row was his way of saying, you can work within a framework, but do things differently based on the need of the moment and the way things are working. As a campus, I would like to see the campus as a fully integrated part of the broader community. I call it reality-based visioning. What do we have? What can and should we do with it? And continuation of what works. We need to expand and bold, but not foolhardy, decisive, but not impulsive. Work within the college. Don't be afraid to try. And change is rarely sudden. It's at the cusp of things that change happens. Disciplines aren't going away, they change and they grow and they morph. So our supporting faculty is to support change, supporting our students to get them confidence in their identity, in their ability, and in the preparation they'll receive from us to move forward. So my abilities, I have strategic planning, trend spotting. I have a lot of experience and ability, a strong communication, change management, and working across disciplines. I have experience finding money. I just recently, last week, got $33,000 just in a grant that I just threw out there. I write and administer grants every year, and I communicate constantly for grants from our partners, again, to let them know we're doing what they want us to do. I have experience finding partners, groups and communities and hospitals, schools, nonprofits, and so forth. And businesses, which is an interesting one, because let's not limit ourselves to the local. Everything can feel local, but it'll take many discrete steps. And finally, inspiration. I believe in the mission of the college. I believe in KuC in particular. I believe there are high and reasonable expectations, and I believe we can meet them. Then that comes from communication of our shared vision and meaningful metrics, maybe not things you can quantify. So as your director, I will bring you respect, experience, leadership, vision, and communication. I think those are the 5 things that I can really bring to this position. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carolyn. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. If you have a question, you can raise your hand through the hand raise emoji. You can also put a question in the chat if you prefer to ask your question that way. Let's set this up here. Yeah. So I'm just going to scan here to see if anyone has a question. Okay, thank you, Amelia Topcock. Go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
As a leader that you see yourself, what was your best experience that you had that you would like to share with us? And also, what was your worst experience in working as a leader, and how did you solve it or be able to work with it? Thank you.
My best experience came when I was department head at FSU. I had an employee, I had 5 departments under sub-departments, and one of them, the head of that sub-department came to me and said, I have this employee, when she's here, she does the work of 3 people, but she's never here. She comes in late. She once brought her kid and had him sitting in the break room all day. You know, this is not good. And we got to fire her because she's unreliable. And I said, wait, that's not really how we operate. So let's talk to her. Have you talked to her? And she said, well, she just says she doesn't have reliable childcare. And that's not our problem. Said, well, yeah, it is our problem because we've got a great employee who's having a hard time in life with something that's completely doable and fixable. So I called her in and I said, you know, first of all, you're not in trouble, but we do need to talk about this and what can we do? And it turned out that she was, I think, 2 courses away of completing her undergrad degree, and she dropped out because she had children. And she had been struggling since. She was a single mother of 3, and it was just really hard, and her childcare was not reliable. And so we worked together to get her free tuition benefit to cover the rest of her undergrad. And once she was a student, she qualified for family housing at the university. And I kind of pulled a few strings. I wouldn't say I got her a leg up really, but I explained the situation, helped her communicate why she really needed family housing. We got her into family housing, which had free childcare. She completed her degree, and now she's gone on for her master's degree, and now she heads that department, that sub-department. And I think that's the best thing I could ever do as a leader, is to model that behavior, that we leave no one behind. And just because something's happening in someone's life doesn't mean that we disrespect them as a worker or as a team member. The worst one, I had an employee very recently. Everything is an argument. Every decision I make, anything I hand down from a higher authority, it's an argument. And I don't mean just then. I can just say, we're done. The decision has been made. You know, I have spoken. And it will go on every day. Will be brought back to me and say, well, we really shouldn't do that because I have spoken. And, you know, sometimes it's, I have spoken. And that's hard. And how I deal with that is to make her feel heard. And I think as long as I make that person feel that I'm listening to them, this is a person who argues a lot. And I think part of the communication style, it's just her communication style. She communicates through an argument. What she's asking is, give me more information to make this make sense to me. And so I have learned over time to communicate in a style that she understands, and not to get argumentative and not to get defensive and not to feel that my authority is threatened, because that's not her intent. Her intent is to try to make sense of it all. And so I pull out my old teaching skills and I try to, in the initial conversation, make it make sense to her. And that's been pretty effective so far. Sometimes she just wants a fight, but it's been pretty effective.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Leanna Isaac, and she put it in the chat. She asked that I go ahead and read it, which I will. She wrote, you mentioned this in your presentation. How do you envision helping students adapt to Western style scholarship while remaining grounded in culture?
I think we can point to Diane's program, actually, RHS. She has elders in their classroom, which immediately puts Native students at ease. And I think that's important. I think having representation is very important to these students, especially when they're far away from home and they haven't been away from home. Helping them learning Native ways ourselves and learning to have to kind of bridge that, because it's not that they're better or worse Western scholarship, it's just a different way. But having good respect for where these folks come from, where our students come from, where the things that they have learned. When you, I've had this conversation recently, when you have, colonization and being told that your ways of knowing and doing and thinking are wrong by people, that hurts and it lingers and it crushes that creative intelligence that everyone is born with. that spark. And we need to reignite that spark through saying, no, you're good. You're fine. Your way of knowing is okay. If you want to interact with the Western scholarship, here's how you do that. And it helps to have representation. I would like to see more of that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Jackie Tagaman.
Thank you, Diane. And thank you, Carolyn, for your presentation. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I have a couple questions, but if it's okay, I'll ask one at a time because they're very different from each other. So the first question, you did talk a little bit about being in Tlingit Ani, and I would love to hear just some of your experiences around collaborating with tribal entities, and then perhaps even your thoughts or your vision for the work you will do at the KuC campus and our tribal organizations. Thank you.
I am the head of the tribal library in Haines as well. The public library is the tribal library. And so we collaborate with the Chilkat Indian Association on that grant every year from the federal government. I've also worked with them on programming, bringing Native programming into our library, cultural programming. We also collaborate with the Chilkat Kwan Cultural Heritage Center, which is a different Tlingit group a little further out the highway for us. They have a wonderful dance group that comes and demonstrates. So they also do blanket and regalia shows. And this is an important thing. Haines is not as, there's not as high a percentage of Native populations in Haines as there is here, but they are active and they are culturally active. And so I think, you know, treating Native people like they are a part of our family, because they are, is the most important thing I can do with those collaborations, and in ways that are comfortable to them. The last thing they need is me telling them how to do stuff. As far as this community, I need to get to know this community, and that's not me trying to be cagey. I think the first 6 months we'll be getting to know the community and letting the community get to know me. I know that my heart and head are in the right place, and or learning what I need to change to put my heart and head in the right place. Being open, and then sharing that as part of visioning. I see, you know, where we get together and we talk about with community members, with elders, with the faculty and the staff, what kind of campus do we want for this community and for ourselves as faculty and staff, and for our students? And how do we think we want to best accomplish what we want to do? And we take the community into account in that. We ask them. We communicate with them, and you know, a lot of times I think we talk about Native populations and not to them, and that's death.
Thank you. Jackie, did you have a follow-up question, or should I go to another question?
I have a totally separate question, and if you want me to sort of get back in line, I'm fine with that.
Okay, why don't I'm going to take another question and I'll circle back to you.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Okay, question from Dorothy Chase. She's financial aid officer here on the campus. And she has this question she'd like me to read. We have many first generation and non-traditional students that are both on campus and in rural communities with limited internet access. What are your ideas and vision to retain these students and see them successful as college students? And what are your ideas and thoughts in recruiting students and retaining them?
So I myself was a non-traditional student. I graduated my undergrad when I was 25. I had to drop out, earn money, go back. It was hard. And so I understand a little of what some of these older students or non-traditional students are going through. They have other things in their lives. As far as supporting them, we have to take their special needs into account. We have to understand why they're here and tailor our programs to our students, and understand their issues. You know, they learn differently. They perhaps need a different method of instruction. They perhaps need a different method of communication, and we need to be completely mindful of that. And when I talked about community relationships a little bit, this is the reason that we want those, right? The community is where we're going to draw our students, traditional and not, residential and not. They're the reason we're here. And we need to become known to the students. Go to the schools, go find them and talk to them when we're not trying to get them to come to school, so they get to know us. Form relationships. I think relationship building is the most important thing we can do. Go to the villages, make it apparent what we offer so that they know what we have to offer. They can make a fair choice rather than, oh, this way or that way. Like, there's more to it than that. We can retain them by offering programs they want to take in ways that make sense to them, respect their needs academically and culturally. It's hard crossing to a new way of learning and a new social set. And we can make sure they know after the hard work that the rewards will be there, that there is a pathway, that they're working towards something meaningful. It's not just sitting there like a sponge trying to absorb, that it is part of a process and part of a journey.
All right, thank you. Another question from Leanna Isaac. Being in an administrative leadership position leaves you alone sometimes. How have you immersed yourself in organizational functions to enhance personnel and student morale?
I go to everything. I mean, I keep a jar of cookies on my desk for staff to drop by because I never want it to feel like coming into my office is going to the principal's office. I have a very collegial management style. If somebody needs something, they know they can ask. And it took a while to build that relationship. You have to model that behavior for a long time before people start to internalize that, no, it's how she is. She's not just putting on a show. I think, if staff want me to come to their staff meetings and departmental meetings, I'm there. And I don't sit and run the meeting either. I listen. The most glorious thing I learned in a monastery was how to shut up, how to just sit quietly and listen and hear not only what is said, but what is not said. Personally, though, I genuinely like people. I genuinely want to be a part of the campus. And I think that counts for a great deal. Authenticity accounts for a great deal.
Thank you. Jackie, we can go back to you if you'd like to ask another question.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to also reflect or have you reflect with us a little bit, both about your experience and perhaps about your hopes or dreams or plans for the KuC campus in regards to the concerns around being a rural campus and the fact that rural campuses at the University of Alaska within the University of Alaska system are, it seems like constantly, but for sure lately, very much in jeopardy. Enrollment numbers, budgets, those kinds of issues, I think are a concern for us at our campus about the validity of our rural campus, as well as just the maintenance. So if you could just reflect on that a little bit. Thank you.
I believe in the vision of this campus and in the mission of rural community campuses. And I think that a part of this has been, and I don't know exactly why it may be from the university level, but again, the relationship is not, we're not heard. And it's somewhat squeaky wheel gets the grease, but it's more than that. It's, I don't want to be so much the squeaky wheel as the, oh gosh, I love my car, I hope it never breaks down. And it takes time to get there. And I don't know that the university is facing large cuts again. But as far as the mission goes, we have Charlene Esther, who is dedicated to this. And so we have a vice chancellor who believes in it. But it's a lot of communication up and down. In my current position, when the people who fund me don't think that we're worth the funding, I have community members going to them and saying, are you crazy? Yes, we need this. And so it's not only communicating up to the university, it's communicating with our communities so that we become an integral part of this. And then they say to people, you can't take this away from our community. We have meaning here. and demonstrating what we do and why we are valuable to the university. People, I learned in the business world that, it's all well and good to say what your value is, but until you can demonstrate its value to the person you're talking to, if they want a transactional relationship, then you have to be ready to make that transaction. You have to be willing to do the legwork it takes to find out what they want and then tell them how you're providing it. It comes down to me, all different levels of relationship. You move from that transactional relationships up to a trust relationship, and from a trust relationship to an interdependent relationship. And that's where I would want to head on this campus. If we want to talk about like next year's budget, I'm afraid I would have to have some numbers in front of me. I do know how to handle these things, and the last place I look at is people when I'm doing budgets, when I need to save money somewhere, but it's complex. And, in Indiana, I had 25 direct reports, 25 departments, and each of those most of those had multiple levels. And a complex budget like that, you really, you have to have a lot of analytical ability, which I do. I see patterns sometimes where others don't, and that's always been a gift. One of my better qualities, actually, as administrator. But I think the human factor comes first, both for faculty, staff, students.
All right. Thank you, Carolyn. I just want to check real quick on the oh, okay. It looks like I'm being informed that our time is up for question and answers. So I really apologize. There were 2 more questions, and it looks like we're not going to be able to get to those. I apologize for that. So thank you very much, Carolyn, for your presentation, everyone for your questions, and Lisa Yancey has put into the chat for everyone the link for the feedback form where you can provide feedback and submit that. That'll be very helpful. And I encourage everyone to take a chance to do that. So I think that is, yeah, I think that closes out our time with this candidate, Carolyn Goolsby. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oyana. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.